Hello, welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine. Welcome to the Dan Really Likes Wine Cellar, where normally it's just me on my own looking forlornly into a laptop and hosting live shows with winemakers around the world. But for today, I've managed to extract one of them from the waves where one normally finds him, or from his Salt River HQ, and dragged him up to the wild badlands of Johannesburg to talk about some new releases, talk about some wine, and talk about waves, which I don't think we can escape. Duncan Savage, welcome.
How's it, Dan? Thanks for having me.
Lovely to see you. Hey, you look perennially relaxed, which I think is partly that surfer DNA, which just always shows people who ride the waves as being relaxed. But you're probably also catching your breath a little because you've just released all of the wine in this absolute blur. How busy, how exciting a time is that for you?
Yeah, look, it's just a facade, you know. Underneath, it's a little bit different. But no, listen, it's been amazing. Hey, we've had such an incredible response to the wines. As I said to you earlier, the last couple of years, we've just developed this following of people who've gotten to identify with our style, fallen in love with what we're doing. And it's not just about, you know, tasting a bottle here or there. They're buying and they're enjoying the wines, which is great. They're drinking them because they keep coming back for more, which is great. And it's, I've actually always said, you know, with our style, it sounds a bit crazy, but we've always tried to make a style that's a little bit more elegant because people like to enjoy the wines. And if you drink a bottle, you generally feel like another bottle, you know, you're not feeling a bit sort of like worse for wear after it. But it's been great. And it's always a busy time for us. The season's obviously the busiest time, you know, the growing season. We're very involved in, we lease a lot of the vineyards now, we farm them ourselves, so that takes a lot of time. So our pressure time, I'd say, is kind of like September through January. That's our real busy time. And then obviously harvest is busy, but it's like a celebration of the season. So it's fantastic.
Well, celebration is probably the right word because I think it took 8 minutes this year for your entire release to sell out. You've got this army of fans, and I get phone calls from people I haven't seen since university. We saw you on the show with Duncan last year. Can you possibly get us some of his wine? Hey, does it still take you pleasantly by surprise that there is just such a dedicated, devoted following?
Yeah, look, it's super humbling because we always say wine and emotion is why it's never good business, because you become very emotional about it. And like the Malmesbury farmers all say, you know, it's better to dig a hole in your back garden and burn your cash because at least you can see where it's going. Where the wine industry, it's this bottomless pit of, you know, plagued by emotion, and it becomes challenging and people sort of get despondent and what's going on here, how's it working? But at the end of the day, it's just such a rewarding thing. And to have people, you know, because of that emotional element, you put your heart and soul into it. You get to identify. We've got some vineyards we've been working with, for example, where never been asked to dance, the Shannon vineyard. The vineyard was so run down. It was basically dead. And over the last couple of years, we've resurrected that block through, you know, composting, mulching, replacing dead vines, and just to see the life that's come back into this vineyard. You know, you stand in the block now, and where like 4 years ago, it felt like something we need to yank out the ground. It's now starting to feel like a Grand Cru. I mean, I know I have to say Grand Cru. I can't go Premier Cru, you know. But the thing is, from that point of view, it's so rewarding because we get to see that side, and then seeing how it influences the wine, and then having people appreciate it. And you know, if we didn't have people buying the wines, we wouldn't be able to do any of that. You know, in a way, it enables us to do what we really love to do. So it's fantastic.
I know the model well. I think most people have a bit of an idea of it, but just clarify it. There's the headquarters in Salt River, which is one of the world's great wine centres. And then they're
it's
not
the home of South African wine.
But a drive through the metropolitan heartbeat of Salt River doesn't reveal a huge number of vines. Kind of a sketch for us how this process works, where your vines are, how you find them, and how this operation all comes together.
So you know, in the early days, when I left formal employment to pursue my dream, you know, there wasn't a bank account loaded with cash. So we needed to figure out what was going to be the way to do it. We didn't want to get investors on board. We ended up stumbling upon this opportunity of this building in Salt River that a guy by the name of Tim Martin had already kitted out a little bit. And we got it at a good deal. And I just thought, you know, I was already buying fruit at that stage. I thought, you know, it's not in the heart of Stellenbosch or something like that. But there's, you know, if you look at Burgundy, for example, generally the wineries are in towns. Cape Town's just a little bit bigger than the Burgundian town. So I like to think of it, we're in the little town. But You know, the model at the time was very much based on how we could build a business without much cash. So buying fruit up front, taking it through to, and initially we rented space, and then once we had the Salt River facility, we started bringing everything into Salt River. And it's slowly progressed to like I said earlier, where we now are leasing most of the vineyards. We still have some where we buy fruit, but it's so important to have control. You know, if you're buying fruit, you're still at the mercy of someone who's looking after a number of other vineyards. So I don't have my own tractor, so we rely on a lot of the guys to do some of the basic tractor work, but then we'll go in and manage all the other processes with different teams. So we have a lot of control. We're spending a lot of money on other people's land, which is obviously quite risky. But at the same time, the model's been good for me, and we've kind of, you know, even though I really want to, every South African, you know, it's like it's a big thing. I think it's ingrained in us. You want to own a piece of land. You want to work your own soil. At the moment, I'm obviously working other people's soil, but I've kind of, the way the business has evolved, it's difficult to change the model, because how do I buy one piece of land that suddenly I want to make 8 different wines from? It's not really feasible. So we're on the lookout for something interesting. But at the same time, the vineyards that we work with, we've put so much love and energy into those parcels that we'll never stop working with them for as long as we can. You know, obviously a lease is not ownership, but we'll see how we go.
I love the comparison you made earlier, admittedly slightly in jest, to Burgundy, in that in South Africa we often kind of think, well, it's a wine farm and a wine estate and they grow all the grapes and they make their wine. Yeah. Yours is not that model, but if you head over to Burgundy as a wonderful example, it's very much the same. You own a piece of land there and a piece of land there and you farm it all over the place. Yeah. So it is a lot more similar than people might realize.
Yeah, it's just Malgas is a little bit further than the odd little Burgundy road down the road, you know. So we drive a lot. From the Pickenese Kloof to Malgas, it's a lot of time in that little Hilux bucky. But
what is the geographical spread of Savage?
So we started initially, the heart of it really, and one of the wines today, obviously Savage Red, began in Stellenbosch at a farm called Langverwacht in Kuilsriver. We don't say Kuilsriver all too much, but we say Stellenbosch because it just sounds a little better. But you know, it's a beautiful place, and it's family of my wife. We've been involved there for a long time. So from there it sort of grew, and I think that's the super exciting part about South Africa at the moment is in years gone by, it was just that one-stop wine shop scenario, from your Sauvignon to your port varieties on the same piece of ground. And as our sort of business grew and evolved, we looked to where can we make the best Cinsault? What's the best area for Cinsault? We didn't think Darling at the time was going to be the best area. It was just an old vineyard with quite a strong maritime influence. And now that we've been making that wine, I mean, I know people say Darling is great for Sauvignon and Shiraz and that, but Cinsault from Darling is just incredible. The Pickenese Kloof for Grenache. You know, we don't work with Elgin fruit, for example, but Elgin for Chardonnay. So slowly but surely, South Africa, different regions in South Africa are becoming synonymous with certain grape varieties, which has obviously been the case in Europe for many, many years. But to see that happening. So that was kind of how we grew our business. You know, we wanted Grenache, we went to Pickenese Kloof. We wanted to work with Sauvignon. We work with a farm there called Ultima, which belongs to Johan Rupert. We get a bit of Sauvignon from there. It's up in the mountains, it's altitude, we've got acidity, it's a perfect place for it. Stellenbosch, that sort of front section of Stellies with all those granitic soils, those sort of very decomposed granites, is, I think, the best Syrah in South Africa. So, you know, that's kind of how it all worked. So, I mean, to answer your question, really, it's from the Pickenese Kloof up the west coast, coming all the way down into Darling. We've got one little parcel we work with in the Swartlands on Jakkelsfontein. Adi, the land baron of the Swartlands, he's just bought Jakkelsfontein. We get a little parcel from Jakkelsfontein, and then heading into Stellies, Langverwacht, which we work with as well. And we've started working with 1 or 2 other little parcels around Stellenbosch as well, and then also going out towards Villagedorp, Kaimansgat area, and then up to Malgas near Swellendam. So Malgas is probably the furthest, and that property belongs to David Trafford, who's just a legend. Dave's such a good egg. And yeah, so quite a lot of driving, but it's awesome.
It also prompted the name of one of your great wines, Are We There Yet? I think it was your dad trying to find out if you'd finally got to where you were headed for, which leads me to this latest slew of releases. And it's always quite interesting for those of us who follow and wait to buy. What are you releasing this year? How are you going to do it? What's going to be the makeup of the wine? What's on the list this year, what's not on the list? How does the latest release line look?
Yeah, so look, the business started in the, we made a business, we did a business plan. I'm not a very technical, I got an E for accounting. Why I took accounting until matric, I have no idea, but I'm not very structured. So my father forced me to do a business plan in the beginning, and the business plan stated we will only ever make 2 wines, a white and a red. Very unimaginatively named, I must say, Savage White and Savage Red. And then kind of when that emotional dynamic kicked in, like I mentioned earlier, that's when the whole thing sort of grew. With the red, it was Syrah, Grenache, Cinsault, sometimes a bit of Touriga. And then what happened, obviously, is, you start to identify with that little parcel of Cinsault, and then suddenly you're making Follow the Line. And then the Grenache we really liked and Thief in the Night came into the mix. So those 2 wines grew to 8 wines, and we've been told by many people, please stop now, because it's getting a bit much. But what we've decided is the core of the range, Savage White and Red, they will always be the core. The wines are very close to my heart, and the sites we work with are very special. Follow the Line and Thief in the Night, I'd say those 4 are the biggest volume production. And then the others, Girl Next Door, Are We There Yet, Never Been Asked to Dance, and Not Tonight, Josephine are quite small volume wines. We try to make everything every year. We've missed 1 year of Girl Next Door, which was 2016. And 2016, I'd say, was probably the most challenging vintage we've experienced, just super hot. I mean, where we've had this string of great vintages of late, 16 was just a real tricky vintage. But what we have decided is that, with the smaller volume wines, if we're not 100% happy with how things are looking, we won't bottle them. And especially we saw that last year, Never Been Asked to Dance. We had a lot of bird damage in the vineyard, so we decided with a 19 not to release it. It's still in barrel at the cellar. And then the Not Tonight Josephine is, we pick between 2 and 3 tons. That's a straw wine for those of you who don't know, but it's 2 to 3 tons of grapes that we make basically 1 2.25 litre barrel a year. So it's actually, we irritate people more with that wine than we make them happy. But the thing with that is, it's where the emotional element of the industry comes in again. It's really nice to do. These drying racks under the old oaks in a farm called Tierhoek, a fairly unassuming vineyard, but that vineyard sits at 770 meters above sea level, intense acidity. And for us to be able to do that, it's great. So if that wine is not 100% where we want it, we won't bottle it. So the 18 we did, which was the maiden vintage, was, obviously I'm going to say it's amazing, but I think it really was amazing. And then the 20 that we released now is really good. You can't almost use the word purity and focus with a sweet wine because there's so much sugar in the thing. But at the same time, that wine with the acidity of Tierhoek and the Pekingese Kloof, it's just got this purity to it, which is amazing. So we want to make sure it's got to be good when it goes into bottle. So long story short, 8 wines, and we're going to try and stick to that.
All right, no more than 8. So this time next year, when the 12 wines of Savage get officially released, let's look at some wine, because it's been sitting in front of me wanting to be drunk some time. We start with the white. When I look, though, both in the Savage Red, Savage White, it's not always exactly the same from my recollection. What dictates how you do it? Have you now settled on something permanent, or is there still a, well, let's see what happens element to it?
No, so with Savage Red, we've settled on it. So as I said, when the beginning we did, it was a blend of Syrah, Grenache, Cinsault, and then occasionally a bit of Touriga. And Touriga is not one to, Touriga is not someone who goes to a party and sits in the corner and shies away from the crowd. It wants to dominate. So we realized at that time that we need to find its own wine, hence Are We There Yet? Obviously the Cinsauts and the Grenaches became their own wines, as I said. So we focused on what was always the foundation of Savage Red, which is that Syrah from Langverwacht in Stellies. And from 2017, the wine is 100% Syrah, and all focused, as I say, on those granitic soils. And there's no plan to change that. We've got a long-term lease on the property. We've been farming it ourselves. A good friend of mine, Francois Bokom Hanekom, and his team helped me farm it, and that's been great. And then the white is one that has changed slightly in the sense that when we left at Cape Point, I was obviously focused on Sauvignon and Semillon, and it was something which we just kind of knew, as they say, stick to your knitting. And then when I left there, I wanted to differentiate the wines a little bit more, so we added in a little bit of Chenin. And for the last couple of years, there's been mostly Sauvignon and Sem with a little bit of Chenin in the wine. But while Never Been Asked to Dance has come into the equation as our Chenin, it doesn't make sense to use some of that vineyard in the Savage White. So what we've decided to do now is, from the 2020 vintage, it's back to Sauvignon and Semillon. And it's amazing because it's a category which for many years, if you remember when Vergelegen was dominating the industry, Vergelegen white, everyone talked about Vergelegen white. And this sort of category of Bordeaux whites kind of like fallen by the wayside to a certain extent. But we've got an amazing following for this wine. And it's not about trying to showcase its varieties, Sauvignon and Semillon. You almost like the great Burgundian sort of statements of, you're not tasting Chardonnay, you're drinking white Burgundy. We want people to stick their nose in this and not quite know what they're tasting. They need to think about it. That's what great wine does.
But I think we are seeing a little bit more of this, and people are taking this a bit more seriously in terms of putting them together. There's no one better to lead that charge than the master of the two. So let's give it a crack. This is the 2020. Oh, that nose.
So it's quite nice and flinty and mineral on the nose still, which is quite typical of the wines when they're young. But also having that really good line of acidity through it, which is quite good. So it's, I like the fact that we're drinking it and not spitting it out.
You're not allowed to in this cellar. I have thrown people out for attempting to do that. The only real use for a spittoon, of course, is to then bottle it as Australian wine and sell it in Europe. What's the art? You've got two grapes here who work so nicely in duet. You've got that lovely freshness of a Sauvignon Blanc. The Semillon is a bit more seriousness. They come together so nicely. What for you is the art in getting that balance of the two just right?
Yeah, they kind of, you don't reinvent the wheel in the industry. I think a lot of people try to, make their stamp, but wine's been around for a very long time. And I think that there's a reason why these two varieties have found themselves together for time. So I haven't really, we've kind of stuck to a model which has been there. And I think you've got this sort of focus and acidity of Sauvignon with this texture and richness of Semillon. And it's just the way they balance each other out is fantastic, because the Sauvignon, if I look at it on its own, it can sometimes be quite austere, there's a lot of acidity. And we don't get a lot of mallow happening in the Sauvignon because the pHs are quite low. And that Semillon just comes in and just rounds off the wine. It's still, while it's young, got quite fresh acidity and quite tight on the palate, but that's what we want, because at the end of the day, we're not sitting around the swimming pool drinking this. We want to sit in the cellar and drink this with a nice, plate of food or something like that. So it's all about more that sort of textural element of the varieties, and the way they're linked together, I think, is fantastic. And it's altitude. It's Kaimansgat and Villiersdorp. Villiersdorp is the Semillon, grown by an apple farmer, Stef Roux, and then obviously the Sauvignon component coming from Johan Rupert's property Ultima up in the mountains. Beautiful area, Kaimansgat. It's amazing.
Two questions then to wrap up with the white. You mentioned food. This wine, at a nice generic, proudly South African level, would say on the back, goes well with fish, which is kind of the depth of detail we so often get on the back of our wine labels. What are you having this with, and what's the aging potential on this?
Look, so I always hesitate to prescribe something or recommend something with the wines, because I think they're super versatile, and as they evolve in the glass, they change. If you slap a piece of steak on the plate in front of you, you're going to grab the red before you're going to grab the white generally. White meat is I think something which can work. You don't necessarily need to have a super clean dish. You can also, with the acidity, have something that's got a bit more richness. People must try the wines with different things. I'm not going to say what I think they should have it with. Ageability-wise, the thing is that we often find, in all of us, it becomes this wine collecting thing. Once you go down that rabbit hole, and this is where Mr. Kilpin, when I see those emails come through from them, it becomes challenging, because you can't say no. You go down this rabbit hole and you want to build a cellar, and it's the most amazing thing. And then sometimes what happens, I think, is sometimes we age wines too long. I've seen that with a lot of mates. They build these big wine cellars, and it's fantastic, but sometimes you forget about certain wines. And I think sometimes with looking at ageability, rather err on the side of caution. I say 3 to 5 years on the white, from now over the next 3 to 5 years. I think the wine will be beautiful over the next 10, but then it all depends on cellaring. If it's well cellared, no problem. But a lot of people do buy the wine and it goes under the stairs or whatever. And in that case, drink it over the next 3 to 5 years.
Which leads to a rhetorical question. What is going to take longer, this to reach its peak, or Derek Kilpin to get engaged? But we won't answer that question. Instead, we shall jump over...
But isn't that why I'm in Joburg? Isn't there a big announcement today?
Well, we don't want to push things too much, but I did see him. I did see him at cash converters in the jewellery department out in Boxburg last week. Let's jump over to the red. And I mentioned that you say that. You say it very emphatically that you believe this is where South Africa's best Syrah comes from. Elaborate on that just a touch.
So look, I mean, I can't make a statement like that really.
You
in
just
the
did,
sense,
so now you have to back it up.
Yeah. Okay. Now, look, I mean, there's in terms of the style I like. So I've before granitic soil is there's lots of different soils people can work with in that, but granite is just you get this line of purity through the wines of the granites. And when I say granite, there's obviously levels of granite soils. You know, different levels of weathering in the soil. So we like to work with the much more weathered granites where it's quite sandy in the topsoil, and then you get your clay in the subsoil. So you get quite a low vigor plant, but it's got some buffering from down below. And then this vineyard we also farm organically, because I think the key to Syrah is that you're not working with vineyards that are too vigorous. I think if your crop levels are too high and your vineyards are too vigorous, you lose a lot of that perfume and that spice. And the thing is, if you look at the reference, I mean, we don't want to talk about the Rhone Valley, but Côte Rôtie, you know, there's some beautiful perfume that comes out of Syrah in that area. And if you look at the way this, you know, the steepness of the slope, the coolness of the area, the low solar radiations, the wind that they get. You know, initially when guys looked at Syrah in South Africa, they looked at areas that were warmer with less wind. But I think that's the wrong thing. You need an influence of the ocean, because in South Africa, that's what we need. We're a warm climate. And you also need wind, I believe. The vines need to get roughed up a little bit. And then also that combined, we farmed this vineyard, as I said earlier, it's been organically farmed since 2006. So there's a natural low vigor in the vines. And you want to see a little, you know, it's like that carrot. The vines need to think every year, yes, guys, this might be our last. We've got to put everything into these few grapes here. And then just after harvest, you know, there's generally the first rains, and you look after them a bit in winter, you know, put some organic material back into the soil, and then they do their process again. But it's just, for me, it's that maritime influence, the granitic soil. It's just, as you come around to Kales River, you've got what obviously is Langverwacht, and then you go around to the Polkadry, and it's just some amazing places. We're planting a Syrah vineyard on a mate's property, which is going to be the best Syrah vineyard in South Africa. It's going to be amazing.
You know what I love about conversations with you is that you are so excited about what you do. And you've been making wine for so long, and it's nothing new, and yet it still clearly invigorates you so much, and you have so much fun with what you do.
But Dan, I think we're only getting started, to be honest, because I didn't have, not that I have the means now, but we have more cash in the business to be able to do what we want to do. And the reality of the situation is, if you want to do something properly, you need to have some cash to do it. So when it comes to rehabilitating vines, when it comes to making things sustainable in the long term, I think I've always loved farming. I had the privilege of being able to farm Cape Point when I worked there. So I got to learn a lot about the whole thing. I don't come from a farming family. And that's the side of it that is really winery it's generally cold, damp, and the wines are in barrel. Once they're in barrel and they're in food, what are we going to do? You know, we leave them. The hard work has already been done. But where you see the results, I think, is in the vineyards. And if I see how over the last few years, so the Girl Next Door is a very good example. And we've taken a vineyard that was planted in a property development, 0.38 of a hectare. You know, everyone thinks it's a good idea. So call the Rhodes, Cabernet, Merlot, all these things, have a little vineyard, jack the prices of the plots up. It's fantastic. But then everyone realizes afterwards, how the hell do we farm this thing? Because it's now suddenly there's this vineyard there. What do you need to do? And if I look at that vineyard, how we've taken something that was totally run down, a little weed patch existing because of a municipal water connection, which obviously I would have got arrested in the last couple of years if I gave that thing water. But we've taken that from a water-dependent vineyard to something completely dry land. And the only way we did that was compost and mulch. And we did that in 3 years. So, you know, you can't make those changes in the winery. You can polish the floor a little bit more. You can polish the valves on the tanks a little bit more. It's not going to make the wine quality better. But if you go and spend time in the vineyard, that's where you think. So I think our journey is really only just getting going, because we've had great, I think, some lovely wines to date, but we're starting to see the fruits of our labor in the vineyards. So I think it's exciting times.
Which leads me, as I wash down some absolutely superb Savage Red, to the natural closing question. I read a report, I think it was in Time or Newsweek a few weeks ago, the 3 most sought after items on Silk Road, the illegal dark web website, were arms, narcotics and Savage wines, because you just don't make enough. They sell out in hours. Kilpin tears his hair out. He's trying to give allocations and he just does not have the wine. Are you happy with the kind of volumes you have, or are we going to see a little bit more and building perhaps on this cult of personality and of wine that you've built up and has this army of people wanting to buy your wine?
No, look, the thing is that at the volumes we produce, we can have full control over what we do. So we don't. I've got another business which does volume wines, but the focus of Savage is that one thing we are sticking to in our business plan is not to grow the volume. So I think people often chase. If there's a good demand, people will suddenly grow volumes. That book's been written many times in the industry. We'd rather manage it, because at least at the levels we are, we know I can get to all the vineyards. My father retired a few years ago, and my dad's a legend. My mother was concerned by the fact that he can only mow the lawn so many times. So he comes and helps me in the cellar, and private customer deliveries. My dad does a lot of those in Cape Town. Now, if we get bigger, we lose that personal touch, and I think it's a fine line. The winery in Salt River is also only so big, and the vineyards we work with are, we've never been asked to dance. We've got the whole vineyard. Can we do more? We can't. It's just that block. The girl next door, I'd have to buy the houses around the vineyard, knock them down, prepare the soil and plant vines. It's definitely, I'd have to charge about 20 grand a bottle for that wine, if not more. But I think for us, it's a nice size to have control and to have attention to detail. I think it's important, because as soon as we change and we become maybe greedy or push volume, we lose that focus. So yeah, we're going to try and stick to what we do.
Look, there'll be some heartbroken people hearing that, but I love that philosophy and I love that approach, and I love the fact that what you do is very much on your own terms, and it shows in the quality of wine that you bring through. The new releases are out. You're not going to find any. They've sold out. There are people bumping up security to guard their stocks of them. But what it does do is give those of us who've got hold of the wine something really, really special to celebrate. Final one for you. And we're sitting down in the Dan Really Likes Wine cellar in 5 years' time, having aged not a day and still looking youthful and good looking and happy. Aside from having caught every possible wave on the planet, what would you like to be telling me in 5 years' time about Savage?
I think in 5 years' time, I hope it hasn't changed too much, to be honest. I think things are really good now. And if we can just have the wines, I'd like to still only be making 8 wines. But, if we could, I just want to see the evolution of the vines. And I want to be, if we're sitting here in 5 years' time, then we must open from 2017, because that's when, say, Savage Red, for example, and we taste, and you must say to me, Duncan, I can see the line of this vineyard through those wines, and then I will be a very happy man. It's kind of what we want to keep. We've chosen a path. I think we're on a track. We've just got to make sure we do things as best as we can, and attention to detail all the way, just getting things just better and better. So we're going to keep trying, and offering value, I think, which is an important thing. We're not trying to, we've got a lot of people who, like loyal supporters over the years, have supported us. So I think our wines not only, offer good drinkability, but they're good value too. So I think it's important to me that they stay that way. I
think you'd have an accountant or two who'd insist you bump the prices up, but I'm very glad that you haven't. I'm also very glad that we're able to spend some time together. So thank you. It's always a pleasure. I look forward to many more glasses of wine, possibly a surf or two. I know we've discussed that.
It's going to happen.
As an outside possibility. And who knows, in 5 years' time, sitting here again, drinking wonderful wine, tasting Savage, and possibly even congratulating Derek Kilpin on a wedding. Cheers. To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.